Hello there, and hopefully we should be live. Hi, welcome back to Dragonborn Industries, and I'm just doing a quick live stream today, which I'm going to be putting up on YouTube as a little how-to on how I did my Geonosian bases, which you can see just down here. Those of you that follow me on socials, like Instagram, which is the main platform, know that I recently got quite heavily into Star Wars Legion, and I've been painting up mostly an Empire force and a clone force, but obviously I wanted to give them like a decent base like we see with things like Warhammer and with other games and like I do with D&D minis to make things more immersive. And I figured for the clones and for the separatists, well the Republic and the separatists, why not go for that classic Geonosian look? So yeah, this is going to be a quick look into how I've done that. I'm going to take you through each step, and I've got some bases prepped out. And hopefully it'll be a nice quick video for you guys to then go away and hopefully do some Geonosis bases of your own. So, most people tend to prime obviously with black, white or grey, but I actually found that to begin with, I actually found this particular red. Ooh, there's the camera, there it is. This is a Rust-oleum matte red that meant I could skip the black primer stage, and then it's pretty much dead on for Doombull. So I've skipped a step here. Instead of priming and then doing Doombull, which is what I'm about to say you should do, I actually found that this was a lot quicker. So yeah, Rust-oleum, red matte. It's a pretty good primer because it's what we want for this kind of thing, but it's a rare one that I would ever get to use. Otherwise, I would prime in black and then I would go for a heavy base layer of Doombull Brown. Yeah, Doombull Brown, which is pretty much all that we need to do there. So the next step was to add some texture, and I'm going to put up some social feeds with like little reels and stuff and little quick videos and shorts where I actually went in, and I'll try and put it onto this camera down here, and I just added some like smashed up bits of slate to that base, and that's literally it. And the rest of the texture is going to come in during this video here, but it is quite literally just different size bits of slate that I have taken and glued to the base before I've primed it. So you can see there with the commander we've got like a nice big bit sticking off the back, and with the droid there, the B1, we've got a couple of bits. But the actual like base itself, that's all I'm doing for this one, is a few bits that have just been glued down before priming. And yeah, we'll go into what's next. So first up, once we have that main colour down, we are going to start looking at, ooh, let's put those in the centre so you can see them, how to get this to this next stage here, which is adding the texture around that slate to give it that sandy, deserty look. So what we want is we're going to take two particular paints. These are going to be two technical paints from Citadel. It is the technical Armageddon Dust and the technical Armageddon Dunes. One of these is going to give us a build-up of layers. The other one is going to act as a sort of texturizer. So we're going to take the Dunes first, and we don't need to water this down because it's a technical paint. We're going to take a nice thick destroyed paintbrush, and we're going to start slopping that on there, really. So the good thing about this is when we do it, we don't need to be neat. The only thing I would say is keep it away from the base edges, because I like to keep mine, well, you can see on my other guys there, on my Commander and B1, I've got them with a black ring around them. But all I'm doing is I'm just applying like thick areas of the Armageddon Dunes, just to kind of give an uneven surface to this base. But I'm also trying to build up a bit of a transition so that it's not just flat when it goes from base to the terrain bits, so the slate. I'm trying to give it that arc up, like sand's been blown against it. And the reason I used slate is because what we see on like the Geonosian terrain, apart from those like spires, we see like those like ridge lines on things. So if you play like Battlefront 2, you'll see those striations of like wind and storms that build up around the outcroppings of stone. So I've got some of the dunes on there, and it's not fully covered because now I'm going to just mix in some of that dust And what this is going to do is just give us a bit more gap between those thicker grains. And I'm going to add that all around the outside there. And again, just trying not to hit that side edge. We just want it to reach there and just kiss it. I would say as well, I was chatting to Craig from Dragon Skull the other day, and I was saying about how most of the technical paints, you need to repaint them afterwards. This is probably one of the only times that I found that the texture and the colour is about right for the rest of the layers. But that's that. So that is quite literally all we've done is put on the Armageddon dunes and Armageddon dust. Come on, focus up. And we'll just leave that to dry. I would leave it, if I were you, either in a heated, warm area or somewhere relatively decent for a good few hours. But I'm going to put that one there so that you guys can see it. And I'll tell you what, I'll move these guys behind them, actually, so we can see what we're doing. Next up, I have a one that's been dried and ready to go. So this one has, and I'll see if I can get it onto the other camera for you, already dried up. So as you can see, they've got loads of lovely different textures. I'm going to keep dropping it because it's a weird angle. And we've tried to build it up where we can, just to look like the sand's piled, but I've also left some crevices, like some nooks and crannies in there as well, because I really want to do these minis justice, because I freaking love Star Wars. So, next up, now that we've got those dunes on there, we're going to go in for a heavy dry brush, and this is going to be with GolgFang Brown. So this is like an orangey brown, and it is really, really good as the next step. So you don't need to do anything else with that technical sand just yet. We're going to leave it that colour because we're going to let some washers do the work later on. But this is going to be a heavy dry brush. So what we mean by that is usually we would try and just catch the very top edges of everything, and we take a lot of that paint off. But actually, I'm leaving a lot of that on. You can see that I'm still leaving bits of paint around. And we're quite literally going to really heavily go over that. Let's just try and get that camera back in focus. There we go. That is probably one of the most important steps of this, is you're going to get quite a few layers of this GolgFang Brown on there, because it really needs to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the shading that will come later. And it seems very bright to begin with, but when you start adding the next steps, it gets very, very, very cool and a lot darker. So that's that. That's how quick that one is. And again, that's relatively heavy there. That is a whopping amount. Still got some of that original Rust-oleum or the Doombull Brown on there. But that's it. That's the next area. So I'm going to put that one down there next to that one. So that is, you know what could be quite cool? Let's put, apart from these guys here, the paints that we're using behind there. So the Doombull, I can't overly show you because I don't know. Well, I can't show you the Rust-oleum, but I can show you the Doombull. So let's go with those ones there. Let's close that one. See if we can. So then we've got the technicals. Let's see, let's see, let's see. There we go. There we go. We'll be able to show you what we're doing all on. So we're just going to clean off that brush. And then we have, next up, is going to be a wash. So when it comes to my regular minis, I tend to not use washes that often or at all, really. But what we have here on this next step is a Fuegan orange. So this is just going to sit in there really, and it's going to do a lot of that heavy lifting again. So it's going to make it like seem more orange. It's going to allow a lot of those details to really start showing through, but it's quite Martian at this point when you start adding it on. So we want to add it to this one, which is our prepped one for the GolgFang Brown. And that's what GolgFang looks like when it's dried, by the way. So it does darken off ever so slightly, but we've got, you know, a decent amount on there still. This Fuegan orange is going to go all over it. So we are going to, come on camera, plant this everywhere. There we go. So this is going to be a heavy, heavy amount of this. It is probably one of my least used paints, and it is, you know, I rarely paint with orange, so like being able to do these bases was a real pleasure to kind of get to use this. And I'm not going sparingly. I am whacking that on absolutely everywhere. And again, it doesn't matter about the sides because we're going to paint those black in a bit. The only thing that mattered with the texture was that we don't want that roughness around the edge. And that's that. That's a Fuegan orange on there. So let's put that one over there. And once that's dry, and this is the longest part again, or one of the longest parts again, is it's going to take a while for that wash to dry. And you do want it to dry. We don't want to be doing any wet blending or anything like that at this point because we don't need to. I think if I was using an acrylic the whole way through and not using just like a, you know, one of the washes or shades, then that would be fine. But next up is Seraphim Sepia. So this is the next shade. This is going to be doing your deeper shading and your recesses, your nooks and crannies. So on this particular one, that's the next step along. This is the Fuegan orange that's been dried. And you can see that there it's starting to look really like orangey brown and dirty. Let's try if we can get that a bit closer. There you go. And it really kind of brings out those textures. But what we're going to do is get underneath like certain areas into those deeper recesses. So Seraphim Sepia is next. And this is where we want to be a bit more sparing. But let's get the heavier areas first, which is, you know, around the base of that rocky area. And I like to try and get into any like straight lines that are going across with the slate. So we can see like those shadow areas. Then where the dunes and the dust technicals separate, because the dust gives us a wider area, we want to get any of those little pools that are created and those lower recesses. We want to put some of that in there as well. And this will give us the depth that we want, whereas keeping the lighter colour up at the top. The back of this rock is really quite bumpy and there's a lot of wells, so we're going to get all of those in there. But that is the Seraphim Sepia stage done. So let us move those guys out of the way. I'm going to push my board back even further because I wasn't expecting to do that for this particular stream. But it's quite fun. So GolgFang Brown will be that one there, and then we've got the Fuegan oranges going on just there, and the Seraphim Sepia, once done, looks like this. That's it, still wet, and we're going into those edge bits there and all around that rock. If my cameras would damn focus. Problem with an autofocus camera, but we're going to add that one to there. Right, next up. So this is where we basically go into dry brushing, and from there we are going to hit this up with some Ryza Rust. So now that we've got that one all painted up, the Ryza Rust is going to go onto one of these. This is it with the Seraphim Sepia and the Fuegan orange on there. You can see those pools of dark, those shades. That's what we wanted with that Seraphim. So, next up, Ryza Rust. We have a dry brush. So, this is not going to be anywhere near as heavy as we were before with the GolgFang. But we still want to be a little heavier than the next few layers. So, we are going to try and only attack the tops of areas. and those downward strokes, because we don't want to go too far into the Seraphim. So all of those kind of like ridges and lines that we get from the slate, we really want to kind of cover those up. And I'm using the side of the brush more than anything really, so that those bristles don't go into any recesses that we have. And again, that's how quick that particular base is. So that's it. There. Come on. There you go. So that's it with the Ryza Rust. And we are going to quite literally move on to the next step. So with the Ryza Rust now done, we are going to move to Tau Light Ochre. So this is our Ryza Rust dry. We can see that it's really pulled out some of those edges, but it's still very, very orange, which I know when we think about Geonosis, well, that's what we kind of think about, but there are more colours within that palette. And we start moving towards, like, sometimes skin tones, and we'll get to that in a bit. So we need to go light with the Tau Light Ochre because it's a layer paint, so we need to be very careful not to just be painting in this bit. We really want to take quite a bit of that off the brush. And again, we're now going to start being selective with where we're hitting. So I'm hitting any top ridges and their accompanying areas. I might go around the top edges of that entire piece of slate because that's quite a prominent feature now. And what you'll notice is that as I'm going up, like I'm adding more and more terrain to this every time because that's how I did these particular bases. But you should be able to see there that that's starting to really show up those edges. And that Tau Light Ochre really does lend itself to the Ryza Rust on top. But I just want to get some more of those top bits down here. We don't really need to go too far. And there's really next to nothing left on this paintbrush. So there is that one there. So that's the Tau Light Ochre dry brushed up. So I'll add that one to the paint pile down here. And I'm going to have to start a new line. So let's put this one down here. That's the Tau Light Ochre. Now, next up is, I actually go in here and I paint around the base. So this is where I will go in and I will paint a black line around. You don't have to do black. A lot of people, if doing Geonosis would, or Geonosian bases, would go back with the doom around there, which is like the original base color. But I quite like the black. I like that separation between the minis and the table, and it doesn't pull me out of that immersion too much. I do need to water this down a bit, or actually going to end up with thick paint lines. So I'll wash that one off, then we're just going to add a bit of water to the side of that and just start blending those together just to start thinning it down. And you may need 2 thin coats, but it doesn't need to be as thin as if you were layering up. So I'm going to just start adding this, and if you add it from the bottom and start pulling it upwards, it's a lot easier to put that on than if you're going from the top, because if you get the black over the edge of the top, that's it, you're redoing the whole base. And let's face it, you don't want to do that. Come on, camera, let's refocus. There we go. So I like to work from the bottom. Get that on there. I may have actually thinned this down too much, but that's fine. We can always add more. We can't really take it away. So thinning it down too much isn't a problem. You also have to be careful with your fingers here not to touch the top of that base if you get any on your hands. So just be aware, if you get any on there, just stop, just wash your hands, let them dry, and go again. Because this is the point where you really could ruin that base. And I've still got more painting to do on top, but you'll see why I'm doing this bit in a minute. So although we've got that striking line between the black and the top, we still want to somewhat edge it. So that's that bit done, and I will show you a close-up of a dried one. So that's the Abadon black I used there for the base, to go around the edges. Just there. And that is where we're at with the next base. So Abadon black goes around the edges, like so, and you should have a difference between top there and the base. But that's only up to, again, the towelite ochre. Next, now that we've got that black around the base, we are going to add some Ungor Flesh. So with the Ungor Flesh, I'm going to put that one just there so you can see what they end up looking like in a bit. So with the Ungor Flesh, this is how I would normally highlight anything that's in Tau Ochre. I would go around with the Ungor Flesh because it's quite close to that in terms of palette. But this is what I'm going to use to pick out those very, 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 very top edges. So let's grab, and we want a small dry brush for this. We really don't need to go too far. It really is, again, it's a layer paint, so we need to take a lot of that off there. And it is going to be quite effective. So let's get most of that paint off. And this is where you want to make sure it's off the sides of it as well, because you don't want this like smearing down your paint job. So we're going to take that and we're going to find things like those corners, those top edges, those raised areas where light would be hitting it a bit more often, or anything that you really want to accentuate. But also, I'm going to go around the entire circle of the base, and you should end up with this really nice light line around that top there. And because it's such a light dry brushing, the difference between the Seraphim sepia, the Fuegan orange, and that towelite ochre that's at the top there leaves you this lovely definitive line around that entire base. And that's that. That is all of the Geonosian bases I've done so far, is in this style, in this way. And there's only two more steps I do, but it's realistically as we start to apply miniatures to them. First thing I would do is with one that's already pre-done, and I'm not going to do it in this room, is I would apply some matte sealer to it. So I use, this one's the Plastikote matte sealer. Make sure your base is fully dry before you apply this, or else all that's going to happen is it's going to trap the moisture in there and you end up with this like white coating that it just ruins everything. So give it 24 hours if you are going to seal them. But I do, so I'll give them 24 hours and then I'll hit this with that Plastikote clear matte sealer. Once that's done, at this point you could add a miniature to it, and that's sort of where we get to this point. And actually I'll bring it up on the camera because it's going to be a lot easier down there to show you. So at that point I would probably add a mini. But what you'll notice is I've done some dusting with some pigment powders after that, and I'll show you how I've done that. So with the commander there, you can see that he's glued to the base, he's got some dust going on his legs, but actually the other one here without his helmet on, I've glued him to the base, and that base has been sealed. What I'm now going to do is add some pigment powder. And to do that, I've got some very specific pigment powders. These are the Vallejo, it's the Rust and Earth oxides. And the most important one is this brown iron oxide, as that is a really dark, deep red, and it goes back to that doombull brown. We also then have these two variations of the orange, which is the rust oxidized, and the old rust as well. And all we're going to do is start bringing those in with a very dry, small brush. We're going to start with the lightest color first, and we're going to bring that to the highest point. So like, we imagine that, or I certainly imagine that Geonosis is this very, 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 very dusty planet. I imagine sandstorms, I imagine many different things that don't really survive there. And I will add grass tufts to mine, but they'll be like dry, scorched ones, and again, I'll show you those in a bit. So the reason I wanted to seal this before I did this step is because I want to be able to wipe away any pigment from the black bit around, but the mini hasn't been sealed, so when we go to seal it again, we can make sure we tidy up anything first. So, I'm taking, this is the Rust, and we are just going to come in from the top and just start gently brushing downwards and stippling at the in between strokes to really kind of like get that orange colour into there. Still going to come down, stippling and getting in there. The pigment powder itself will stick to the mini. You don't need anything else but the dry powder. But the sealer afterwards is going to make sure it stays on there. We're also going to hit the base with it as well. And we don't need to do it everywhere, but we're going to do it certainly around the top of that rock where the trooper is standing. And the reason we're starting with the light orange and then working our way through the darks is, again, we can always add more. We can't take any away. And that's because the pigment powder is so hard to get off. You would have to use paint stripper. And then even then, it might still leave some kind of texture. But we have the orange on there. And that is quite a light coating. So it is... Oh, my lights aren't going to light that white, are they? Barely noticeable on there. Let's see if I can show you on this one down here. So there's less light down here. Let's go to here. There you go. So you can see that there is a very, very light coating of that rust oxide pigment dust on there. But we now need to add 2 more dusts to it. So that one's done. I'm going to blow away some of the excess on it. However, close the lid on your pigment powders before you do anything like that, because oh boy, does it make a mess if you leave it open and do it. So actually get rid of most of the excess, which makes sure I didn't spit all over that, because again, water and stuff is going to be a problem. Next up, we have the old rust. So this is a lot darker. This is more of a like orangey brown. It goes back to that kind of like GolgFang Brown, so it takes us back quite a few steps, but because it's quite thin pigment powder, it should show through all of the highlights that we did earlier through the dry brushing. And the trick here is to really get those boots and not go too high on the shin pads that we go up to the very top of where we did the orange before. We want that fade, we want that blend, we want it to really show up that there is a transition of like heavier dust down near the bottom of the boots, and then like it's all been like kicked up and pushed towards the shin, so like there'll be like a lighter amount of dust, and we can show that through color shading with the pigments. So again, we're going to add that to the base, but I'm going to start adding it around the edge rather than the very top, so that we get some of that shading in there with the pigment powder. And that's again all we do on that one there. So let's put that one down there and push that back. So there are quite a few paints that have been used so far. That one's closed. And that is, again, we'll show it on this one down here, the second amount of pigment dust. And the boot should really start to show up now. But one more to go. This is the very, very last thing in terms of adding colour to the mini. This one is the brown iron oxide. So this one is really dark, and it's closer to that doombull, that original red. We see that, and then compare it to like what we had with the original base, which is still drying over here. We can really see that that's pretty much spot on for what the original base colour was. So we're going to take some of that doombull, or the old iron oxide. And this is where I'm going to come in right at the very base of the boots. And it's more of an upwards brush stroke and a stipple. We don't want to go too far again. Again, less is more here. If we went all the way up the mini, it would just be one colour. And I've done that. That's not worked overly too well before. So let's have that one there. And we're going to add some more of this to the lower lands of the base itself. Especially those like darker areas where the Seraphim sepia sits. So that we get those colours down there. It looks like it's jumped up onto the rock and then gone up and over from there. So that is all of the colour that we need to add to his boots. If I show you on the bigger camera, looks like he's been running through the Geonosian dunes. And once that's done, because the pigment powder is dry, what you'll be able to do is go back in again with your matte sealer and just give it a quick coating all over everywhere. And again, do make sure it's dry, or else there's nothing worse, and I did it actually with the B1s, than it not being quite dry and it causing a layer of white to almost frost over the top of it. And what I actually did, it wasn't the paint that was still wet. I hadn't waited long enough for my first layer of sealer. So give it 24 hours between layers. Most of the time you'll only need to seal it once, but you really, really, really just want to make sure it goes in there. I said I wasn't going to do this in here, but I am going to show you. And you don't need much. It's just enough to do that. But that will take 20 minutes to be touch dry, and then it will take me a little while to go in there and add anything else. But one of the things we can do from there, once that is fully dry, we can then go in and add something else. And I've done it on the B1 battle droid here, but I haven't done it on the commander because I didn't have room on the base with that big bit of slate. So we've got a grass tuft. And the grass tufts that I've used are from Rival Crafts. So the actual ones themselves just there is the Barren Lands from Rival Crafts. So these are their 4mm tufts, which look like they come in a pack like this. And I've used the Barren Lands on all of my separatists. For my clones, and it's just for me, so I have that separation in the different types and different armies that I would bring to the table. This one is the Scorched Earth, and this one is a lot more red, which I wonder if I can show you again on that camera. Let's see. I'm going to add this one to most of my clones because it's closer again to that Ungor Brown, and I suppose I can get a small one onto that particular base. So let's grab one of these teeny tiny ones and show you. I would most of the time add a dab of glue, but I'm just going to show you quickly with just the basic adhesive that it's got on there. So I'm going to take my commander, I'm going to take a very small bit, and I'm using a pair of tweezers to pick it up rather than my hands so that I don't get too much damage on there. I'm just going to gently put it on it. I'm using one of the points of the tweezers just to press it onto the base itself there. And if I had super glue, I would use that. But that is my troopers. I shouldn't really pick this one up. There you go. All painted up with Geonosian bases. And that's that. That's how I did my Geonosian Star Wars Legion bases. Hopefully that'll be something useful to you guys out there. If it is, happy days. If it's not, move along. But I'm going to be doing up the my Coruscant ones next. So I did my Empire and my Rebel forces with city drop ones. So I got a lot of the premium bases, but I also got some ones from War Scenery that were currently not up here. Were very much base toppers that I 3D printed and put on as well. And I really liked that kind of like grimy city look from things like Andor. So I figured I wanted my Rebels and my Empire to be those. So that's going to be my next tutorial video, which is going to be on doing up those ones. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Until then, see you around.